Welcome, you're watching Kaleidoscope Srilanka Live News Capsule. It is no secret that Sri Lanka state-owned enterprises are in trouble. In fact, we've covered this topic on Kaleidoscope very extensively. The government of Sri Lanka set up an SOE restructuring unit under the Ministry of Finance, and in March last year, the SRU was ordered to divest an identified set of SOEs. The biggest loss makers right now are Sri Lankan Airlines, the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation and the Ceylon Electricity Board. But with elections coming up, is this the right time for privatisation? Research fellow at Verite Research Dr Malathy Knight broke down the issue in detail. With elections in the offing, is this the right time for SOE privatisation?
A short answer to that is no, and my reasoning is based on timing. With elections come increased uncertainty and heightened risk perceptions. So this depresses asset prices because investors look to high premiums. So we will not get value for money. So this is my contention. Now, in spite of this, if the policymakers want to go for privatization, then there are two conditions that need to be met. First is that competition must precede privatization. That is essential sequencing, and that was the reason, the main reason behind the success of the SLT privatization back in 1997. The second thing is that there must be transparent and independent accounting to ensure that the realized present value from privatization will be greater, larger than the long-term value under state ownership. So those two conditions at least must be satisfied if we are thinking of going for privatization before election.
Right, so even though there are elections in the offing, what can be put in place to make sure that SOE privatization process will eventually happen?
There's a lot of misperception around this, and SOE reform is seen as equal to privatization. But SOE reforms is way more than that. I mean, we talk about losses. We need to dig beneath the surface and ask why. And the answer, the elephant in the room, is corporate governance. Now, the IMF GDA and the IMF reports have recognized this. And there were two commitments. One was up to 2022 to have the 52 key SOEs annual reports published, and the other one was to publish audited financial statements. Now, both of those haven't been met. Then on top of that, the GDA had as a primary recommendation the setting up of a holding company. That is also not in place, and the SOE law that we've been talking about, and we need that to give effect to the other reforms. So that's all about corporate governance. We have a lot to do before we get to privatization.
So which SOEs are ready for privatization, if any?
I spoke to you about this last year, and then I identified Sri Lankan Airlines as a possible candidate. Why? Because it is not a strategic entity that has needs public interest and needs SOE, needs state ownership. And also because of the colossal losses. But what happened there? What happened there is that 1 year down the road, we haven't privatized, and that's also the government has been trying, and there has been no investor appetite. But we need to look at the options. What the government did very recently was to assume $510 million onto government books of debt, SLE debt. Now, is that sensible? Should we have looked at other options like maybe declaring bankruptcy, shutting it down, versus assuming all this debt right now? We don't have the numbers, we don't have transparency for this analysis, but this is something that the public needs to know. The public needs to understand why we are doing this, why we are not doing the other thing, and all these decisions have to be based on concrete data and analysis.
Is privatization the only answer to our problem? Are there no other options?
Definitely privatization is not the only answer, and that's seen all over the world. I mean, basically we have to look at what type, it's unique, case by case, what type of entity are we looking at, what kind of market, is it a natural monopoly, is it a competitive market, is it an essential service? We need to look at all of that. And even now, if we look at CB and CPC reforms, those are not about privatization. It's about competition and unbundling and regulation and tariff setting. Like I mentioned before, corporate governance is very important. I mean, for something like that, listing on the Colombo Stock Exchange is very, very good because you're forcing disclosure requirements and moving towards better corporate governance.
Kaleidoscope is on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and like us for more.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.